Good evening. Welcome to Shaping the Looking Glass. Now that you've written your personal looking glass list, I'd like you to start thinking about how all of those philosophical goals about teaching work together. I'd like you to ask yourself, what shape do these goals make collectively? I know I can already hear and feel your silence and your bewilderment at this question. You're thinking, okay, this is the hippy dippy stuff that she was talking about, right? I can't make reassuring eye contact because I'm not there, but just bear with me for a second. Do you remember writing concrete poems when you were in college? Let me see, or I'm sorry, when you were in school. Let me pull this up here a minute. There we go. So remember that oftentimes you would write a poem in the shape of what it was about, right? Here is a fox one. Of course, I had to pull that, but it doesn't have to be an animal. It could be anything that kind of the shape and the words are working together. So, okay, I'm not going to ask you to make an animal-shaped teaching philosophy poem for your future employer. That's not where I'm going at all. But I do want you to think about the relationship between words and space on the page. Let's take a look at a couple of poems and how some poets do this. So this first one is Direction by W.S. Merwin. All I remember of the long lecture, which is all I remember of one summer, are the veins on the old bald head, and the loose white sleeve, and the bony finger pointing beyond the listeners over their heads. There was the dazzling wall and the empty sunlight, and reaching out of his age, he told them for the last time what to do when they got to the world, giving them his every breath to take with them like water as they vanished. Nobody was coming back that way. Take a look at this one as well. This is also by W.S. Merwin, who, by the way, wrote in the late 20th century. He only died recently. He passed away. And this one is called Strawberries. It's a very different theme, but look and see how the words and the space are working in the page. Strawberries. When my father died, I saw a narrow valley. It looked as though it began across the river from the landing where he was born, but there was no river. I was hoeing the sand of a small vegetable plot for my mother in deepening twilight and looked up in time to see a farm wagon, dry and gray, horse already hidden, and no driver, going into the valley carrying a casket. And another wagon coming out of the valley behind a gray horse with a boy driving and a high load of two kinds of berries, one of them strawberries. That night when I slept, I dreamed of things wrong in the house, all of them signs. The water of the shower running brackish, and an insect of a kind I had seen him kill climbing around the walls of his bathroom. Up in the morning, I stopped on the stairs. My mother was awake already and asked me if I wanted a shower before breakfast. And for breakfast, she said, we have strawberries. So you might recognize this next poem because it is often anthologized in high school and middle school texts. It's by Ferlinghetti, and he was a beat poet who wrote primarily in the 1950s and 60s. He hung out with, just slipped my mind, sorry. He hung out with Allen Ginsberg, and they wrote poems that questioned mainstream politics and culture. They were particularly interested in looking at materialism. They wrote in free verse, very different than the specific Walt Whitman poem, although Walt Whitman did not always write in the same way as the poem that we read together in class, but very different than that more formalist style. They were opposed, the Beat poets were opposed to academic formalism, and they were interested in kind of pushing the boundaries of writing poetry. And they also infused a lot of their works with jazz kind of cadences in the same way that Langston Hughes does, because we talked about him also. One of the things I want you to notice about this poem as well is not only the use of, and this of course is in Merwin's poetry as well, but not only the use of space and words, or blank space and words, but also the use of sound and how those things are kind of working together, and then shape, how all of it is kind of working together to convey meaning. Constantly risking absurdity. Constantly risking absurdity and death whenever he performs above the heads of his audience, the poet, like an acrobat, climbs on rhyme to a high wire of his own making, and balancing on I-beams above a sea of faces, paces his way to the other side of day, performing entrechat and sleight of foot tricks and other high theatrics, and all without mistaking anything for what it may not be. For he's the super realist who must perforce perceive, taught truth before the taking of each stance or step in his supposed advance toward that still higher perch, where beauty stands and waits with gravity to start her death-defying leap. And he, a little Charlie Chaplin man, who may or may not catch her fair eternal form, spread-eagled in the empty air of existence. So I want you to kind of move between this concrete and this figurative piece. I want you to start thinking in metaphor. Think collectively. What shape does your looking glass make when each component is read with the other? I once had the opportunity, I'm trying to pull this up here and I can't see it, sorry. Here we go, good. I once had the opportunity to ask a question of Tom Slay, who had published this collection of poems called Army Cats in 2011. And the question I was really curious about, there are lots of poems in this collection, and the question I was really curious about was, how did he select and arrange the poems in the book to create the book? How did he choose? How did he make those kinds of narrative decisions? And his response to me really kind of has guided a lot of my research and thinking about narrative selection and arrangement over a long period of time. And what he said was that the collection of poems, these selections, made a shape, and whatever shape they are is what kind of guides the organization of these poems. He said they could make a spiral, they could make a circle. I can't remember all the shapes he said, but whatever shape they make kind of pushes how you will arrange all of the selections, all of these individual texts. So I kind of tried this out because I thought, I'm not sure that I particularly understand this. And so I went home and I had a collection of poems, maybe 10, 5 to 10, something like that. And I spread them out physically on the floor. I printed them out, I spread them out physically on the floor. And I started to arrange them. And of course, you could arrange them into many shapes, but the shape that kind of organically appeared was an hourglass. Okay. Nope, that's not what I want. Here we go, was the hourglass. Just want to make sure that I'm still sharing the screen with you here. Sorry about that. Okay, was the hourglass. And what happened is, what we had kind of a lot of poems and the topics kind of centered in on something, which for me in this particular collection was memory, or the topic of memory, which was kind of interesting to me. And so infographics do this as well. Here's an example of this. And look at how they're using space and words and images on the page to convey meaning. And then, of course, the video that you just watched also did this. We talked about stepping into the circle. I'm gonna come back here. Okay, sorry about that. So we talked about stepping into the circle, or the speaker talks about stepping into the circle, and the circle becomes part of the meaning of this initiative for prison education, right? And what the meaning here is are these connections between people and these experiences between the connections. And they start out right in this wider circle, and then they come into a tighter circle, but they're still stepping into the circle. They're still connected. There's a relationship. There's meaning in common experience between them. So I'm going to return now to my original question and some kind of thoughts on how to proceed. First, I'd like you to reread your 3 to 5 personal looking glass statements and think about them carefully. Think about maybe if you were going to bold a word, what that would look like in each statement. Think about any kind of patterns that you notice. Then I want you to consider how you would arrange them visually to demonstrate some kind of relationship. How would you arrange these words on the page? It may be that you include images like an infographic, but how would you arrange them for someone to understand pretty quickly how they all kind of relate to one another? And this arrangement may also privilege one of these statements or one of these list points over another one. But what is it about all of them together that conveys meaning collectively? That I want you to think about. And so use that arrangement, that shape, that negotiation between space and words and images, if you want, on the page to tell us something important about what you believe about teaching. I can't wait to read what you discover, and I can't wait to see you in class again soon. Please email me if you have any questions, and I hope you have a wonderful week.